we have to be engaged. As we talked about earlier, if we're not, the only thing that is required for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing, right? That's what the saying goes. And so if we're not engaged, we're going to get the government we deserve.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Solid, episode 59. Today we have something a little bit different. We've got a special guest, someone who's running for Utah State Senate, Trent Staggs. It's going to be an incredible one today. I hope you listen to this, because whether or not you live in Utah, you're going to learn some great fundamentals of things that it takes to really have a great country and a great community. I think regardless of where you live, Utah is known as a place of great families, a place that has great communities. There are people flocking to Utah right now because of those things. And Trent currently is a mayor of a town called Riverton, which is an incredibly fast-growing town right now, because there are so many people that want to live there because he's done such an incredible job. Obviously, it takes an entire village to make an incredible place to live, but it also takes a great leader, and obviously he's done that. So I'm excited for you guys to listen to this one. How do you feel about it today, Brandon?
Yeah, I think it was really good. I mean, this is an intimidating topic for me. I believe in the Founding Fathers' Constitution, but all this, all the way all the government branches work and everything. I get it. I know who I want to vote for, but it gets so confusing. There's so much noise out there,
Yep.
So again, kind of intimidating me to talk to a political leader, especially someone who's running for Senate or something like that, just because, I need to get more educated on this stuff. And so I thought it was really good today. I think he kind of went over, politics 101. And I just recently was at a little get together the other night with Glenn Beck, and as we were there, we were talking. I talked to a guy that was there, and he said, "If you don't get involved in politics, politics will get involved in you."
Yep.
And it made me think about it a little bit more, because I've always thought to myself, I don't want to get involved in politics, but I'm like, my wife Lexi, she's always been, kind of more learning more about it, especially the last decade or so, and because of her, I've learned a lot. But without her, I probably wouldn't pay a lot of attention, and we need to. We need to be aware of this stuff. We need to share this episode with a lot of people out there, not just for Trent Staggs running for Senate, but because of these principles and philosophies we're talking about, so that you know what to do in your state and at your local level, and who you want to choose to vote for based on what you believe in.
Yeah, well, I think it's so important to get involved in politics, because it always reminds me of that statement that says, if you're not willing to confront something, then you're condoning it.
So true.
Right. And so when, whoever's listening to this or you're watching this today, I hope that you listen to these core values, because regardless of who you are or who you vote for, if somebody has good core values and they're willing to stand up and fight for those things, then obviously we're going to have great communities to live in. So thank you guys for plugging in today to another episode of Solid. We're very excited for this one. Please give us your feedback. Remember to like, follow, subscribe. We've had so many people that are asking us how can they support us. Share it with somebody. Share your favorite episode with somebody. Leave a comment down in the comments or on our social media. Create as much engagement as possible. We really appreciate it. We're so grateful.
One more thing too.
Yeah.
I think the Solid 30 Challenge, we just wrapped that up.
Yep.
And those of you that are still maybe doing it now, I encourage you to do it.
Yes.
Do that challenge, and we're going to recognize some people who have already done it.
Yep.
And we want to hear about your stories, what happened. I mean, I know I've got some cool stories of some of the phone calls I made and people I connected with. We'll have to do an episode the next couple times here about Solid 30 and what it's about and what it did for us and those who have already done it.
Definitely. And if you did it, send us some videos. We would love to showcase you on that episode, because there are so many people that have reached out to us, said, hey, this changed my life and I'm going to continue living this way. So yeah, definitely. Thank you for all of you that did that Solid Challenge with us as well. So remember, stay solid.
Well, appreciate you being on. I know you don't have a lot of time, and we wanted to definitely get you on here. I know that you've got some exciting things you're working on right now, and we wanted to have you on and make sure people know who you are, what you stand for. I know we talked a little bit earlier today just about our podcast and what we're all about with Solid and just our whole premise of looking for people that have lived solid lives and have solid lives. And we see that with you as we've been learning more about you and there's a lot going on right now in our country, and that I think that we just need to continue to make sure people are aware of, so that when they go to vote or in their communities or whatever, they know who they want to vote for and what they want to do. And I think I'd go ahead.
Not the person just making the most noise, but also the people that they align with the values. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe it'd be best. I mean, you've had a lot of success in your life up to this point, and maybe just tell us who you are. Who is Trent Staggs, and what are you doing right now? And just turn the time over to you, and we can go from there.
You bet. No, thanks. This is incredible. I enjoy or appreciate being on here, and a little bit about me. I'm a lifelong Utahn. I grew up here, actually in Orem, and then moved up towards South Jordan, Bingham High grad, U of U undergrad, MBA from BYU. So I've been here from elementary school to graduate school, I like to say, and I've raised my family here. I've got a 13-year-old son, 11-year-old daughter. My wife and I have been married since 2007, and she's a lifelong Utahn as well. We love this state. I love my community. I've ended up serving in elected office for the last 10 years, 4 on the city council and 6 as mayor. And in that time, I've really taken a business person's approach to municipal government. And I think that's key. We need to have people that have solid business experience. Speaking about solid business experience and background that they can take to city government. I've operated several businesses over the last, my 25-year career, and mostly in finance, some real estate. Also have been in the consulting world and really developed a name for myself in helping really cure ailing organizations and put them back on their feet, and was asked to be on the board of directors of a company that I helped take public. We got listed on NASDAQ last year. It's in the energy space. So quite a bit of experience broadly in business. And again, taking that approach to municipal government, I think that's really what we need. So in the 10 years I've been in office, I've actually cut property taxes, cut taxes, we've cut spending. I've saved tens of millions of dollars for our residents. I believe we have the lowest fees and taxes in the Valley here in the Salt Lake County area. And that's what I've tried to do. I've demonstrated kind of an innovative or entrepreneurial approach. We got away from many county-led services and determined we could do these better on our own, whether it be police, our fire district, animal control services. And again, we've saved tens of millions of dollars for our residents in doing that. I've also, something that I think is important that people know about me is that I'm a fighter. I've always fought and been on the front lines. I like to say that mayors are on the front lines of fighting government overreach. And sadly, we have all kinds of government overreach that we can point to at the federal, state, and county level. But as a mayor, we're getting constantly these edicts from above, and we have to fight back. You have to be able to demonstrate that. So I've demonstrated not only fiscal conservatism, but on a lot of these other issues that I think are so key. With mask mandates, for example, I was one of the few mayors that stood up and said, hey, I'm not going to deal with this nonsense. I'm not going to use my police department to enforce what I believe are unconstitutional mandates, that and also in vaccine mandates, when the federal government through OSHA tried to force vaccines on organizations of 100 people or more, or 100 employees or more. We have about 170 employees in the city of Riverton, and we're about 50,000 people. We're a top 20 city in terms of population in the state of Utah. And so I said, absolutely not. I pushed back on different land use decisions by the state government and UTA and taxes, multiple taxes. So I think I've demonstrated that I'm somebody who people can count on to fight and stand up. And that's why largely my wife and I have decided to run for United States Senate. I found that we need that more than anything in DC. I believe in term limits. I'm in my second term as mayor. I didn't contemplate running a third. And so I tried to sit down with my family and say, is there something else in terms of public service? Is there something else that we need to do or that we can do? And this race in terms of the United States Senate kept coming back to mind, and something that I felt like we needed to be able to take on because uh, the senator that is up for reelection here, Mitt Romney, in the next in 2024, has not kept the promises that he made to folks, and I think Utah deserves actually a proven conservative to be in that seat, somebody more in line with Senator Lee and some other great senators in the United States Senate that have demonstrated consistent conservatism, and that's what I want to be able to bring.
Awesome. Let me ask you this. Where did, obviously you have a perspective that aligns with our values, these solid core values that lead to great lives and have built the communities that we feel so grateful to live in. Where did this, have you always had these perspectives on government and what causes great communities? Were you brought up that way? What happened to where you started saying, you know what, I need to stand up and do things like reduce taxes or stand up for medical freedom, like you were just talking about with the vaccines and those kind of things? Where did all this start for you?
Well, I think naturally I'm a contrarian. I think I have a healthy distrust of government. I have it's really from my family. And my father in particular is a constitutionalist, and we would have conversations about government. And I think, unfortunately, that happens too infrequently, right? With Americans and with Utahns. I think the level of civic and economic literacy amongst our residents it could be improved. Let's just say it.
No, it's horrible. There's actually a lot of social media. I don't know, Brandon, if you've seen them, where they go around and interview people and just ask them like basic questions, and they can't even answer any.
What's the saying? If you don't get involved with politics, politics will get you involved. It's something like that.
Yeah. If you're not interested in politics, politics is definitely interested in you. It will commandeer your life, and that's what people. You take a look at the founding of this country, and people were very conversant in the Constitution. I mean, it takes maybe 30, 40 minutes to read the whole thing with all the amendments. And if you take out the amendments, you just want to look at the core, 7 articles of the Constitution, in 20, 30 minutes time, you can read through it. And people used to debate, the different pieces of the Constitution. They were very engaged, not just voting. I mean, engagement, I think, extends far beyond just placing a vote. You have to be informed. You've got to be conversant in the issues and know whether or not your liberties are being trampled. We are the safeguards. The power is in the people. We're the ones that are supposed to be safeguarding the rights that our founders bled and died for. Unfortunately, we don't have enough of that dialogue going on today. So that's really where it stemmed from. My family, we would openly talk about these things, say at the kitchen table. My undergraduate degree is in political science and economics, and went on to pursue business. But I've always had part of me that was interested in government. And back in 2013, I decided to run for city council. That was the first time I even had an inkling to run for office. We had an issue in our neighborhood that had me attend city council meetings, and I just looked at the dais, and no disrespect to people that were there, I just felt like, I've got a business background. I'm somebody that could add value to our city. This is my community. This is where I want to always call home. This is where I want to raise my family and kids. So I wanted to step up, and I did. I ran against a 12-year incumbent. I knocked every door. I ran on a certain platform of smaller government and economic development so that we could lower our taxes and fees and having more community engagement. And it resonated. I won by 105 votes. And then I ran 4 years later for mayor against another 12-year incumbent and ended up, winning a good 60% of the vote here at that time, and then was reelected in 21 and ran unopposed. So I don't know if that's a sign of I'm just doing things right. I mean, it must be, or other people just, they're just content with the way things are going.
Well, it's good. Yeah. I mean, I think, what you just said brings me, I was actually just at lunch with a guy. We were talking about the mayor here in St. George, and his father was one of my teachers in junior high and high school, actually, and it was just a great guy. And he retired about 5 years ago. And I go, wow, I never saw your dad retiring. Why did he do that? And he goes, well, the education system has changed so much, he just couldn't be himself. And this was a teacher that everybody in our community loves. He is a great man, and but felt like he couldn't be the man he was to impact children's lives the way he had always been because of education has changed. So going back to the question or the comment you made about people not understanding, just being able to go through the Constitution, right? A lot of that stuff is not being taught in schools. What's your perspective on what's happening in schools today? And how do we fix these things? Because I personally believe that a lot of the challenges we're seeing in our communities are because of the education system. You know, when he says his father retired in 2017, we don't realize like a lot of those kids are where a huge percentage of these votes are coming from, where it wasn't a normal thing in the past that young kids would vote like that, but they are now. I think because of social media and things, there's a lot more youth voting than normal, or at least having a bigger voice than in the past. So I think education and what we're teaching kids in junior high and high school has a big impact on our communities. How do we fix some of these problems, or do you see a problem in it? What are some of the problems, and then how would you fix them?
Yeah, great question. Yes, there are a couple of huge problems with respect to education. I go through a few of them. I mean, first of which, on the federal level, and this office that I'm seeking in the U.S. Senate, has to deal with that. There shouldn't be a Department of Education. I mean, frankly, there's no constitutional directive, prerogative for federal government being involved in education. The education budget is about $174 billion they have to spend this year. Like, why do we have that?
Wow.
And the state of Utah,
That's crazy.
State of Utah, only about 7% of their budget. I spoke to a couple of the state school board reps, and that's about the amount of the state budget that comes from federal funds. It would be so nice just to be rid of that. Just cut that string altogether, because it comes with so many strings in terms of education and what they're trying to teach people. That's the first thing. Secondly, with the state, the other big issue that I see is that partly because of that federal string and that attachment, but also just some other things that are going on with education, you've got this wokism that is being taught at schools. And I'm 100% against it. If you go to my website at trentstaggs.com, you take a look at the issues page, I've got smaller government, safer families, stronger economy. And under the safer families theme, there are three issues under each one of those overarching themes. And under the safer families, education is part of it. Get rid of the Department of Education at the federal level. But then I also have a section called woke and state. And I say there needs to be a wall of separation between woke and state. I'm tired of hearing about this separation between church and state. Well, wokeism is its own ideology and its own religion. I believe that's the case. It's got its own dogma. It may not have a pope or a Bible per se, but it's an ideology. That secularist ideology is being taught at schools, and it's pervasive. And it's been happening and going on for decades now, 50, 60 plus years. And that's had an impact. That's had an impact on what we were just talking about before, about civics not really being taught. I mean, economic and civic literacy is at an all-time low. Patriotism is at an all-time low. This wokeism is actually teaching kids to hate their own country. And it can't be in school. It can't. I mean, one thing that I fought against as well, back in April, I actually addressed our school board. The Jordan School District encompasses Riverton City, and they actually have their board meetings in Riverton. They've got a facility here where they have their board meetings. I conduct a school safety roundtable at the outset of every school year. And we talk about the city, how the city can help the schools and our kids. The cities here in Utah don't fund education and they don't set the curriculum. But I said, nonetheless, these are our kids and we're very interested in them. The cities do provide school resource officers, crossing guards. Those are actually city employees. A lot of people don't know that. So we pay for that. We determine these safe walking routes. So over the years, I've had requests to bring in more school resource officers, done. More crossing guards, done. And then other programs to help drive awareness of mental health issues. We did that as a community to try to destigmatize that and talk about it. But this last year, I brought up these inappropriate materials in schools. And I said, what is being done here? This is as much a safety issue as physical and mental safety. I didn't get a response. I kept after it and kept after it, never got anything back from school administrators. So finally in April, nearing the end of the school year, I said, enough is enough. I went there, attended the school board meeting. I've been talking with parent groups and residents here that were sending me examples of things that their kids were having to learn in school. And it was obscene. It was literally obscene. And we have a state representative, Ken Ivory, that just passed a law last year that talks about inappropriate materials. And it says, look, if there are these 5 things, if there are depictions or illustrations of these things, this is inappropriate. It's pornographic. It shouldn't be taught. I mean, if we can't talk about it on the 6 o'clock news, why on earth is my 5th grader, or 7th grader learning this garbage? It's out of control. So I called out the school board, and that video actually went viral on Twitter, and we got an overwhelming response from people. And we're continuing to work with them to make sure that this is taken out of schools. So that's what we need. We need people that are bold. To answer your question, we need people that are bold and are going to stand up and say, enough of this garbage. Solid people that will stand up and make sure that we make the change that we need to.
Yeah. So do you think that, obviously get rid of the Department of Education, who do you believe should control the curriculums? Because I believe, we choose a place to live based on where our kids are going to schools. A lot of people buy homes based on where the schools are. Who do you believe should be controlling what our children are learning in schools?
Parents. I say on my website that parental control of education isn't just priority A, it's priority A to Z for me.
Love it.
Look, we need to, our educators are really there in a secondary role. The role of parents is paramount. And that's what I've tried to point out, even with school districts like the Jordan School District. The education community likes to call out the per pupil spending, and there isn't a high correlation in Utah really amongst per pupil spending and outcomes and test scores. It really comes down to whether there's it's culture. It's whether they've got a great family network. That's going to help kids succeed more than anything. If their parents are involved, and you've got great organizations like Utah Parents United and others that are really getting out there and making it easy for parents to, number one, be aware of materials that may be inappropriate, that are being taught in schools, and how parents, maybe more importantly, how they can engage and how they can act and maybe change that.
Awesome. Or even hiring teachers that believe in what you just said as well, right? It's so hard, these days to find, a lot of times, I homeschool my kids because of these issues. I'm fortunate enough to have the freedom and the resources to be able to do that. But it's a battle that I believe that needs to be fought because not everybody's in that situation, right? There's a lot of parents that they don't really have another option. And wouldn't it be incredible for them to feel that their children are going to school and learning these, philosophies and fundamental principles of how to have great lives from great people. We were just talking about that at school today at lunch because of this same school teacher. He had such a positive impact on my life. And, I'm grateful because I didn't grow up. I was raised by a single mom, and a lot of these strong men that were teachers in school that had some great core values really influenced me. And I'm so grateful for that. So I think that, if we can make a positive impact in schools, then and kids are doing better and they're learning core values, and they have more tendency to want to learn and want to go into their communities and want to be involved and want to see that, go forward. So I love that perspective. Any questions?
I agree. Yeah. I think a lot of people listening to this, there's a lot of people from Utah listening to this, but there's a lot of people nationwide that are listening to you as well. And I think it's important that we learn, it doesn't matter what state you're in, the principles that you're teaching right now, I think are the foundational Constitution rights that we all, as Americans, I believe, want to have, right? So even though you are going for a position to be a Utah state senator, why does that matter to people across the country? And I mean, I feel like I know why it matters. I mean, you listen to people like Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota, and you go, man, I love hearing her speak, right? Because of what she stands for. So what would be your comment on that? And why is it important? I mean, we want you on here because all this is very educational. We want to spread this message across the country.
No, that's a great question. And I think the answer lies in this is a seat in the United States Senate. There's only 100 senators. And whether you live in Utah or you live in Rhode Island, having a conservative voice, if you are conservative, matters. It really matters. I mean, take a look at what has happened with just the Supreme Court justices that have been nominated, right, under Trump. And we had conservatives that appointed them. Look how consequential that has been. It's the Senate that actually confirms these conservatives. And when you got a guy like Mitt Romney, that's one of 3 Republican defectors, I say, and he's voting to support the most radical Supreme Court justice in Ketanji Brown Jackson, that just in the last year that she's been on the court, has been on the wrong side of so many big issues. That's important. And so people understand that having a bold conservative, even outside of your own state, is going to help reduce the size, scope, burden of the federal government and ensure that we have conservative justices to the court. These are really, really big issues. And that's why our campaign has been so appealing. I got to tell you, just in the past 5 weeks since we've announced the candidacy, I've received donations online from over 43 states, I think now, at TrentStaggs.com.
Awesome.
It's been remarkable. We've been across all major media. I've been endorsed by some really great conservative pundits. And that has had a huge impact to get our message out there and to really show not just Utah, but the rest of the country that there is a strong conservative here in the state of Utah that if you help support, will be able to advance the type of limited government that you're looking for.
We are the United States, so that speaks to that. All the donations coming in from other states, I love to hear that.
Absolutely. Another thing that blows me away today in politics, it seems to me that 30, 40, 50 years ago, there were a lot of core values that whether you were, conservative or liberal or Democrat or Republican, that there was a lot of core values that politicians could agree on. And it seems like today that they're so far apart. And I feel like that's what's created so much division in our country today is there really aren't these core values. I don't know if you've seen the RFK and Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you watch that, I go, it's crazy to me that I listen to him talk, and a lot of the things he's saying are today's conservative values, but they're not really. They're American core values that whether you're Democrat or you're Republican or conservative or liberal, we should agree on these core values. How do you feel about that in politics today? I mean, would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I would agree with that statement that, sadly, we used to all be kind of America first, right? Individuals across party lines. One of the presidents, I love Ronald Reagan. I love Abraham Lincoln and George Washington. But there's a lot of what John F. Kennedy said back in 1960. If you take a look at his inaugural address, for example, I love reading through some of that and some of his other things. He was very hawkish, cut taxes. In his inaugural address, he appealed to our revolutionary. He said, we are the heirs to that first revolution. And that revolution was that the rights of man come not from the consent of come not from government, but from our creator, right? From the hand of God.
Oh.
And I don't hear Democrats saying that at all today, like referencing God, creator. We had such a providential view of history at our founding and recognize that, and we have to. That is, again, our revolutionary form of government, that we have inalienable rights to life, liberty, property. That's it. And people across party lines, yeah, used to agree on that, but anymore, sadly, we've become more and more divided. And I think that's by design. That's a tool of the left to really kind of divide and conquer.
What would you say to somebody, Trent, that may be thinking, the world's going to hell in a handbasket? What am I going to do about it? I'm a regular guy, regular gal out there that is living my life. Just maybe, politics 101. What do we do? What can we do? Do we just throw in the towel and say, heck, I'll just take care of my family? Do we keep fighting? What are your thoughts on that? I say we keep fighting. We got to choose the right side, right? And show that what we stand for. But what does somebody do?
We need to keep fighting. I mean, this is it. We have to be engaged. As we talked about earlier, if we're not, the only thing that is required for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing, right? That's what the saying goes. And so if we're not engaged, we're going to get the government we deserve. And sadly, we've had a lot of folks unengaged. We need to jump back in and jump in the fight. And that will ensure that our constitutional republic, which is the longest republic in history. I mean, you look at other countries and how often their governments have changed over through other written constitutions or become monarchies. Yeah, we need to ensure that this constitutional republic remains and stays strong so our kids and successive generations have the same opportunities that we had. And we're not going to do that if we just put our hole in the head like an ostrich and say, I'm going to be removed. So what does that mean? It means understanding the Constitution. It means finding good people. If you're not wanting to run yourself, it's finding good people, solid people that are going to run for office and support them in any way that you can, whether that be financial or volunteering.
And you're talking in their individual cities, counties, not just at the federal level, right? I mean, we may not have a lot of control over the president of the United States, but you being a mayor and starting off where you started off, you all see this firsthand. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, across all layers of government. That's what we need. We need people that understand the Constitution, understand limited government. That was the system that was devised. It was supposed to be distributed. It isn't supposed to be centralized. And over the last century in particular, more and more power has been centralized in Washington, D.C. If you look at the top 10 richest counties in America, I think 6 or 7 of them are around Washington, D.C. It's disgusting. I mean, so at the local level, your city council member, mayor, school board, county, the state, the states are supposed to be a check on that federal government. We need to have people that are elected to state government even that are going to stand up and really push back. That was the intent, is that the states would really put a check on the federal government. So it's important that we elect good people that understand the proper role of government across the board.
Something that blew my mind, I think it was in the Joe Rogan interview, actually, RFK talked about what it takes to run for president, the funding. I think it was $500 million to run for president, right? I mean, maybe we can talk about that for a second, just because, you're running to be a senator right now. And what does it take? I mean, what does it take to do that, to be able to be competitive? I mean, Mitt Romney's been around for a long time. He's got a lot of, power that way. What does it take? Maybe financially, but obviously we got to have the people behind you, but that takes money too.
It does. That's one of the most unfortunate things about the system. I believe it's a $10 million race. You look at Mike Lee, they got elected last year, between monies he raised and then what they call soft money or PACs, political action committees or those types of organizations that also pitch in. I think there was about $10 million on his side to about $8 million from this Evan McMullen that he ran against. So a state of our size, I think it's about a $10 million race. In Pennsylvania or other states where it's larger population, you could be 20, 30, 40. I mean, California could be $100 million, Senate race. It's ridiculous. But that's where I think we're at here in the state of Utah. And yeah, Mitt Romney's he's an establishment player. He's going to have money himself, and he has access to other donors that are part of the establishment or the swamp, if you will.
Crazy. Let me ask you this. Obviously yesterday was July 4th, and there's so many people that it seems like for one day of the year, they have so much pride in America. And I think a lot of people forget that day we're celebrating, all these fireworks was because we had a bunch of men who are willing to revolt against a government that were angry over taxes. You talked about cutting taxes. They were angry. They were willing to stand up, and they actually had to go fight. You talked about fighting. And I feel like in modern day America, I was actually surprised. You talked about the mask mandate when COVID hit. I was surprised how many people just willingly and blindly followed orders rather than using some critical thinking skills. So when it comes to this, I believe that the Second Amendment is crucial for us, not only just keeping our freedoms, but actually defending them in the future as well from the government. And it always reminds me of that quote that says, hey, they asked another prime minister, you ever going to invade the United States? And he said, we can't invade the United States because there's a rifle behind every blade of grass. And I think that should be the perspective of every other country. But I also think that within our country, yesterday we went to a parade, and, in this day and age, you always worry about mass shootings and these kind of crazy things that happen. And in southern Utah, I feel pretty safe. I just assume that there's a large majority of good men and women that are carrying, and it makes me feel safe. And I know it makes my wife feel safe that we know our community and we know that a lot of those people are carrying, and it makes us feel safer. How do you feel about the Second Amendment? How do you feel about concealed carry rights? What's your perspective on those things? Because I feel like that is a fundamental issue that is going to lead to everything else that we want in the future, is having rights to bear arms.
Yeah. Well, it's fundamental. As part of it's the Second Amendment for a reason. I think next to freedom of speech, the five things that are offered in the First Amendment: freedom of religion, speech, press, petition, government, assembly. Those things are absolute. We have to have those. And the founders knew this because they were great students of history, and they understood tyrannies and how government can really end up becoming tyrannical and forcing people into subjugation. So the Second Amendment is right there behind it, the right to bear arms, and as you said, I think in communities where you have high gun ownership, it's been proven statistically even that crime is down. People are conscripted right to that militia, and they are there, and it's a fundamental right. We have the right to for self-protection. I think it's a biblical principle, but it's also a principle that's part of our founding documents in the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, clearly. So that is something we absolutely need to stay vigilant on, because you're right. Any government in history that has become tyrannical, what do they do first? They go after people's ability to defend themselves, and we've seen a lot of that. I mean, the narrative has just been overwhelming from the media and the left in particular about needing to go after people's right, constitutional right to defend themselves and to carry and bear arms.
So do you feel like that slope, because I feel like part of the slippery slope that people go down is, 30 round magazines, and you look at what it takes in order to get a suppressor these days, which is really better for everybody who's going to learn good marksmanship, or, you look at what people have to go through, not only just in order to be responsible gun owners, right? And then people who are learning good marksmanships, but also you see this narrative of, hey, nobody needs 30 rounds in a magazine, these kind of things. And I feel like that's a slippery slope where people say, oh, well, yeah, maybe we can limit it to this, but then you're just limiting something else in the future. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. I think that is, look, they know, they being the left and people that want to remove that Second Amendment, they know that they're never going to be able to do it all at once. They want to take it by degree. And that's kind of that boiling frog syndrome, right? They want to put the frog in the pot. They turn it up slowly and take it away by degree. Before you know it, it's gone. And so, yeah, whether it be number of rounds, whether it be red flag laws and other things that aren't well thought through, that create a system where without due process, you can basically just be put on a list and you can have your weapon removed from you. I mean, who's ultimately going to decide whether you're competent to be able to have that or not? I mean, that's a pretty scary proposition. As are getting lists. You probably saw recently, if you use your credit card, they were coming up with and to use the credit card to purchase a firearm, that the government was able to have access to that type of data and information and basically create their own list of gun owners. And we've already seen how these federal agencies can be weaponized against the average American.
Yeah, we just saw that with the ATF and the brace, right?
Yeah, right. What's interesting is you see the powers that be that are talking about firearms, and they can't tell you the difference between an AR-15, or a standard bolt action rifle, or they don't even know what they're talking about. Is a big problem that I see. Right, we've got to have people that actually know what everything is and what a magazine is versus what a round is versus what a bullet is versus what just everything.
It goes back to constitutional. Learning about the Constitution, right? Same thing. If you're going to have an argument about something and you're going to have an opinion about something, you probably ought to have some education about it first.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it always blows my mind. A pistol brace on a rifle to make it a pistol, in my opinion, makes it actually more dangerous, right? Because it's a rifle's supposed to be... Anyway, we could go on and on about that.
Yeah, for sure.
But Trent, what would you say? And there's a lot of issues, obviously, but in your mind, what are the top 2 or 3 or 4 issues you want to hit head on right out of the gate?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. And that's why at my website, again, TrentStaggs.com, you see smaller government, safer families, stronger economy. I mean, right out of the gate, I think we need to address the size, scope, burden of the federal government. People have asked me, what's the biggest issue? It's that, whether we're talking about taxes, regulation, mandates, you name it, we have to address it. I think taxation, number one, let's go with taxation, regulation. Those two, people don't realize and I know you guys are financial guys, right? You've been very successful in the financial world, so you understand these, but it doesn't take, a lot of sophistication financially to understand that back in 1913, when the income tax was first instituted, you realize that the first $3,000 of your income was exempt. And that today is the equivalent of 91 grand. So if you made $91,000 today, you paid zero income tax, not a dime. And then the top marginal rate was 7%. And you had to make the equivalent of 15 million bucks today to be even topped out. What's the top marginal rate today? I mean, it's in the 30s. People are paying 25 to 30% on average in taxes. It's insane. It was never intended to be this way. What's happened over the last 110 years? We don't have a revenue problem. There's more revenue, trillions coming into the IRS than there's ever been in history. It's not a revenue problem. It's a spending problem. And we've got to get that under control. This taxation is just, I mean, we talk about the founders. They fought a revolution over a fraction of the income tax or the burden, the taxation burden that we have today.
Yep.
And so people have got to wake up.
Yeah, wasn't the T tax like 0.9% or something like that? I think the T tax was less than crazy, 1%, right?
It was, and it's not just taxation without representation. It's taxation. It was tyrannical government. It was overreach of government. So there's that. Flat, fair taxes. There's a number of things that conservative groups are out there debating, proposing. At the end of the day, we need a substantial tax overhaul, and then the overregulation. I talked to many business owners. I just went through a filing listing a company on NASDAQ. It was insane, the amount of regulation that we had to go through. I talked to many business owners, and they say, Trent, I hear on TV the term too big to fail. How about too small to succeed? My small business is too small to succeed because I can't afford the army of accountants and attorneys that I need to comply with all this garbage. I mean, in Riverton, for example, we were the first city. I eliminated the business license fee. You don't have to pay it. it cost us about 150 to $200,000 in revenue. But I said, look, I'm so tired of having to be and operate in cities in the past where I've got to pay $200 to hang a piece of paper on the wall. I mean, what value is the
That's
city
awesome.
really providing you just to give them? So we need to cut through all this regulation. It's a $4 trillion drag on the economy. It costs around $20,000 per employee for the employer just to comply with all this stuff. Wouldn't you rather give that 20 grand to that employee? Wouldn't they rather have that in their pocket?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are things that like Senator Lee has been championing called the REINS Act that will force finally Congress to do its job and not abdicate its responsibility to these hundreds of federal agencies that are promulgating, making all these rules that force businesses to comply with stuff that has never been approved by our elected officials.
Yeah.
Right. So there's zero accountability. And that's the problem. So taxation overhaul, REINS Act, and other things to get rid of the
Real quick before you
overregulation that
move
we have.
on that, I love that topic, Brandon, because when we were in business, one of the things we always talked about is our job as leaders was to reduce doubt and fear and increase hope and belief. Right. And a lot of businesses, they should never feel like they're too small to succeed. I mean, for me to hear an American say that is just crazy. Mm-hmm. I think anybody who's willing to take the risk to be an entrepreneur, our job as leaders, whether it's a political leader, a mentor, anybody else, is always to reduce doubt and fear and increase hope and belief. And by you talking about that, even if the 20,000 wasn't there, even if it wasn't monetary, but the perspective of just hope about I can succeed, I do have less red tape, I have less to think about. An entrepreneur already has so much to think about to succeed, right? And so if they can get rid of those things and focus on the things that matters, which is providing a good service or a good product to their community and actually winning and being an example of hope and a shining light, is awesome. So I love that topic, man.
100%.
That's great to
100%.
hear.
So those are two of the biggest things I think that we need to address immediately to get smaller government, get it under control. The safer families, we talked about education. We've talked about some of that woke and state separation that we need. On the economic front, I mean, we've got to address immigration. This is a huge, huge problem. It's one of the few things that Congress, if you look at Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution that delineates actually the things that Congress should be doing, this is one of them, and they're completely failed in their obligation to take this on. It's a disaster at the border. I've talked to several people there. I talked to a gentleman who just sold his ranch down in Texas because every day, 20 to 30, mostly men, single men, are coming across there. And if you don't talk about the right to self-defense, if you aren't armed, you're in jeopardy. And the human trafficking and the drugs and everything, it's just absolutely horrible what's going on there. And it substantially impacts the economy for so many people with illegal immigration.
What do you think is the solution? I mean, obviously that's such a hard topic, right? When you talk about immigration, I mean, it's so messed up. It's like, how do you glue this thing back together? What do you think are a few things that can help solve that challenge quickly, or at least put a dent in it?
It is, but it shouldn't be. I mean, that's what our country, and especially Utahns, I think, are so empathetic, and they're so generous that for some reason immigration and immigration law has become controversial. I mean, every other nation enforces the travel of non-citizens and immigration. And we just need to enforce the laws that we already have on our books. I mean, this Remain in Mexico policy was a great thing that Trump had started. You realize that some people are coming across, they're claiming asylum, and then they're just let into the country. We've had 6 million plus people estimated since Biden's been in office that are doing that. And I use the analogy, it's like going into Disneyland and saying, hey, look, we can't take payment right now. Why don't you go ride, do all the rides, whatever you want to do, come back here at 3 p.m. and let's go ahead and take payment then. I mean, they're out 2, sometimes more than that, 3 years for their court cases, their asylum seeking court cases to be heard. And they're just completely being, we're losing track.
Do you know what percentage of those people show up to an asylum case? What percentage is it? Do you know?
I don't have that percentage offhand, but I know it's it isn't high.
That should be the obvious answer to that situation right there. I'll bet it's in the single digits.
Yeah, it really is concerning. So I mean that the Remain in Mexico policy is one. I think the border wall, you have to finish it. The walls work. I mean, look at Israel, that and other countries that have that. We want to have a door, right? As others have said, and President Trump, you want to have a good process defined so that people can come here. I mean, my relatives came from Italy and Western Europe, so I mean, I'm an immigrant myself, or like my ancestors are, but we have to have a process that can assimilate people. And when you have 6 million people in a couple of years, I mean that's twice the size of our state of Utah.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about that, we're only 3.2 million people. We have that many people that are just flooding. Where are they landing? People don't know. They're not able to reasonably assimilate into our country, and we don't know who they are. You know, many of these people coming across are on. It's not just Latin American countries. They've got a list of well over 100 countries where people are coming from. Many nations that don't really have our best interests at heart, right? So we need to address that. And I think just those two policies with the border wall, with the Remain in Mexico policy, those work. And we got to get a lot more aggressive with the cartels. We are enriching, because of this lax immigration policy. We're enriching some of the most nefarious people on the planet. They don't give a darn about people, and they are brutally taking advantage of folks. And you see it every day. 100,000 plus deaths with fentanyl. So we have to get serious and really, I think, put pressure on the Mexican government to help stamp this out. And so those are just a few things with respect to immigration, I think, that would make a big difference right away. And we saw it under President Trump.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let me ask you this. This is kind of an off-topic question, but who's your hero in life? When all's said and done, who do you measure yourself up against? What's the man you want to become like? What is it that, drives you? What kind of core values do you see in somebody else that has driven you and that kind of thing? Who is that person for you?
Well, I'm an avid reader. I love reading all kinds of books. I'm also a man of faith. And I have to say that Jesus Christ is that man that I want to emulate. I mean, here's somebody that I think had character beyond repute and just poise, always in control of his emotions, and just had incomparable grace, when confronted in any situation. So that's the person ultimately that I would strive each and every day to try to emulate. I fall well short of it every day. But there's a number of other characters in history as well, that I can point to. Talk about some of the presidents that I've admired, political figures in the past, whether it be Washington or Lincoln. Ronald Reagan was such a bold conservative as well. I really like some of those leaders in history.
Awesome.
Good answer.
I think the first one was good enough.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Trent, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you being on. We want to get this out to as many people as we can. We need more leadership like yourself leading this country, and anything we can do to help you, we'll do. And I just really appreciate you being on. I try to talk intelligently on a call like this. I'm not a political genius by any means. My wife is much better than I am, but I do know what's right and wrong. And
we already know who's the brains in this operation.
Yeah, that's not me for sure. But anyway, yeah, no, we appreciate you being on, and these are some important issues and things that hopefully we can help rectify a little bit in this country and get this country, I would say, back on track to what our founding fathers had in store for us and fought for us.
Definitely. We need more men with great core values like you that are willing to stand up and say something. So appreciate you running, and hopefully that we can play some sort of part in getting you in there, man. I look forward to seeing you serve.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, it's I appreciate that, because sometimes I have to question my sanity, I think, a little bit, right? I have folks that come up to me and just say, why are you doing this? I mean, a U.S. senator makes $170,000 a year. You've got to travel at least 4 or 5 days a week. You're going to be away from your family. You have to maintain, a residence in DC, one in Utah. It's just why would you do this? Your life becomes a fishbowl. It really does. And I expect that I'll be attacked. Right. And the bottom line is that I care deeply about my community, my country, my state. And I feel that we need, at this time more than ever, we need people that are going to stand up and get the country back to where the founders had envisioned this, so that we can be the envy of the world for another 200 years. And so it means a great deal to be able to have your support and that of your audience. I really appreciate that.
Well, that's a great way to end. I'm glad you brought that up. The sacrifices that need to be made from people like you to so that we can have the freedoms we have, and we appreciate it. So
yeah, doing what's right isn't always easy.
Yeah.
Even though it should be, it's not. So
absolutely. Well, thank you, Trent. We wish you the best, and we'll be doing what we can to help you out.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, Trent. Have a great one.
We'll see you.